As far as Biden and Harris are concerned, while they welcomed the assassination of Nasrallah because he's responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans, they say we have to avoid escalation. I think that's disappointing and it's the wrong message.
We all remember that Donald Trump was furious at Bibi Netanyahu, accused of him of being disloyal, something he says about Jews a lot.
Welcome to the Fourcast, where four frum pundits talk politics. Meet the all-star lineup.
I'm Benjamin Rose, Mishpacha magazine editor-at-large.
I'm Maury Litwack, Teach Coalition CEO and political insider.
I'm Stu Loser, a longtime Democratic communications strategist.
And I'm Eli Steinberg, conservative commentator.
Okay, so let's get down to politics.
Welcome to another edition of the Fourcast. I'm joined today, as always, by Stu Loser, Eli Steinberg, and Benjamin Rose. We have an exciting program today. We're going to get right into it. Terrorist leader, Hezbollah leader, Nasrallah was assassinated, as the news have put out there today, and everyone's reacting to it. It really begs the question of how will the Middle East in general and how Israel is handling terrorism affect and impact the American elections. But at the same time that happened, Ukrainian President Zelensky found himself in a bit of trouble where he went to Pennsylvania, a battleground state, to visit a munitions factory, something that he felt was connected to the Ukrainian war, and got massively criticized for. So we're here today to jump right into it and talk about something we haven't talked about at length before, which is how is foreign policy going to impact these elections in the next 40 days, 45 days, as we get closer and closer to that date. So I'll kick it off right away with Stu Loser. What do you think, Stu?
These are two serious existential issues. The fate of the world literally stands in the balance. Anytime you have a serious moment and you have Donald Trump, he fails to rise to it. And if he rises to it, he can't rise to it for more than a minute. We saw this when he talked to Zelensky and talked about how he thought Vladimir Putin didn't even really want to fight the war anymore and would be willing to settle if only Donald Trump was president. The more we talk about serious issues, not polls, tricks, not anything else, not horse race stuff, but serious world issues, more people will see that Donald Trump is not up for the job. In Kamala Harris advances by default.
Eli, what do you think?
So just two-part answer. To answer your question directly, how much it will impact the race. To the extent that there are people in this country who care, say, more about what's going on in Ukraine than they care about, the kitchen table issues, the economy, etc., then it would impact the race. However, every bit of data that we have tells us this is really an economy election, the economy and the border. And those are the Donald Trump issues. Regarding Stu's point as to which candidate would actually be better, sure, there's a lot of people who would make this argument that Stu's making that Trump gets distracted, et cetera, et cetera. But people, and this is the item about the economy that's working very much in Trump's favor, people remember that during the years that Trump was president, we didn't have this world on fire sort of situation that we have now. And that's the part that also works very well for him. So people might have opinions about Ukraine. People might have opinions about anything else in the foreign policy arena. But people will remember there were no massive conflicts going on, and people felt safer, and people felt, more importantly, to this election, like their money by the federal government was being spent where it should be, on them.
All right, so I want, before you two get into it, which we expect and we're excited about, Benjamin, you've covered Israeli politics for decades. You're in Israel as we speak. Give us a little flavor for what's going on there in terms of how you think about this.
The one bit of flavor that I can give is Shabbos morning. Everyone knows that I daven Vatikin, I daven Nates. I'm up very early. And I'm up around the same time that the Arabs are shouting out their call to prayer from the mosques. Now, I live probably about 2 miles away from the nearest Arab neighborhood. So in the background, in the morning when I wake up, I always hear them. But on Shabbat morning, they were so loud, I couldn't believe it. And I said, something must have happened. Something must be different today that they're so loud. And now, of course, in my neighborhood, we have a lot of people who are involved in security. So they're still online, even on Shabbat. And I found out what happened during the course of the morning, right after davening, actually. And of course, I had to wait for many hours in order to actually sign in myself and confirm what happened. But people, needless to say, were in a very celebratory mood the Shabbat in Eretz Yisrael. To try to get this back to the presidential race in America, right now, as we're speaking, it's about 48 hours after the assassination. And I'm surprised that we haven't heard one official word from Donald Trump about this. I know that Jared Kushner did issue a very long missive on X where he called the assassination of Nasrallah the biggest thing in the Middle East since the Abraham Accords. But we've heard absolutely nothing from Trump himself. I'm surprised. I know that by the time people are listening to this, I'm sure he'll have weighed in with the reaction. But again, I'm speaking at this moment, again, 48 hours after the assassination. And it's not like Trump is a guy who the cat got his tongue. So I'm waiting to hear what he says. Now, as far as Biden and Harris are concerned, while they welcomed the assassination of Nasrallah because he's responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans, not to mention thousands of other people over the years, once again, they're sending the same double message that they've been sending all along. When in the same speech where they applaud Israel, so to speak, for the assassination, they say we have to avoid escalation. I think that's disappointing and it's the wrong message. I was just listening to an interview that Jake Tapper at CNN did with Dan Sullivan, a Republican senator in Alaska. Sullivan is on the Armed Services Committee. He made a very important point. He said the way to avoid escalation, and we all want to avoid escalation, but the Republican way of avoiding escalation, according to Sullivan, is to allow Israel to restore its deterrence. Now, that's very hard to do, but Israel is doing it. So we have to let Israel play offense a little bit longer and let the other side beg for a ceasefire. And that way we'll avoid escalation. And just as a final note, I want to mention that as of this moment, if you were to look on Ynet or the website, the lead story has a headline, "Hey West, don't interfere, Israel is working." And then the analysis says, Israel did the right thing because it cannot suffer anymore from the world's blindness. Whoever wants peace must strike at Hezbollah while threatening Iran. And this article was written by Ben Dror Yemini. Now, despite the last name Yemini, he is not a Yemeni. Ben Dror Yemini is a lefty. He's very anti-Netanyahu, but he basically came out and said the same thing. This is the spirit in Israel. We have to finish our work. And from a political point of view, Americans will have to decide which type of administration will let Israel and Ukraine finish the type of work it needs to do. Will it be Trump or will it be Harris?
Let's kick it back over to Stu here, Stu. In terms of what Binyamin's saying, he said Biden, Harris, and I thought to myself, oh, he makes a mistake because he forgot that Harris is running. But I'm like, no, he's tying it because of that. Do you think that this type of thing is credited? Do you think the foreign policy is attached to Biden, sort of hand in hand still, Stu, or these things sort of go similar? Like how closely is this affecting it? Because the Zelensky thing is an issue. We haven't even talked about that. How closely is the foreign policy sort of being wrapped up with Harris right now and affecting it? And I also want you to comment on why has Trump not commented right now on this major issue happening in Israel? And I mean, Jared Kushner did, but that's not Trump.
Well, the second one is easy because clearly he hasn't commented because he doesn't think it's in his interest to comment, or he thinks it's not in his interest to comment. Same thing as abortion, same thing as every other issue. It's important to religious Christians. He's with them until they're locked in with him, and then he's looking for someone else. He perhaps hasn't gotten polling information to show what people should actually think. These are complicated issues in American politics, I guess. As for foreign policy, Kamala Harris has Joe Biden's legacy, whether or not she likes it. And it is a strong legacy. There are people who are among our listeners who would dispute parts of it, although they would also dispute my friend Eli's assumption or statement that everything was great prior to October 7th or prior to a couple of years ago, that it was really okay when people were just building tunnels and not running through them. And that's a bit of an exaggeration of what you said, Eli, but I don't think our listeners think that our world wasn't on fire before.
Definitely
I think
much
that they
better.
think that it's come to the surface.
Ali, you gave us a final word here. What are your thoughts here? Again, I think Binyamin brought up a good point in terms of Trump's reaction to it. I'm also interested in your commentary a little bit on the Zelensky thing, which again, I think is important that he was in Pennsylvania. What are your sort of closing thoughts on all this?
Sure. So regarding Trump, I think this point pulls us back very well to the discussion we had last week. Nobody thinks that the ball game for Trump is whether or not he releases a statement. everybody knows where Trump stands on Israel. Everybody knows where Trump stands on Israeli security. Nobody has a doubt, as much as Stu wants to make it happen, nobody has a doubt that Trump wouldn't be backing Israel on such a move. If you find that person, unless they're, D and Y, let me know. But nobody has a doubt where Trump stands with Israel, right? I mean, he did things that even other Republicans we consider pro-Israel wouldn't do, like moving the embassy, etc. Not that, okay, that's a different episode. Okay. This goes to words versus actions. Just remember, the Israelis used the 2,000-pound bombs to take out Nasrallah. Just a few weeks ago, Kamala Harris at the National Association for Black Journalists said she was fully behind and felt that the resolution for the conflict in the Middle East, one of her big moves was being fully behind the pause sending the 2,000-pound munitions to Israel. So if Kamala Harris would have her way, Israel possibly would not have the munitions that they needed to take out Hassan Nasrallah. And that's actions, not words.
I gotta let Stu respond real quick. Go ahead, Stu.
I want to get back to what you were saying about Zelensky in Pennsylvania. Zelensky then came back and met with Trump at Trump Tower, and Trump talked about his impeachment and how Zelensky treated him. We all remember that Donald Trump was furious at Bibi Netanyahu, accused of him of being disloyal, something he says about Jews a lot. Trump says it's about Jews a lot, for calling Joe Biden and congratulating him on winning after it was clear to anyone who isn't lying that Joe Biden had won. It is not so clear that Donald Trump is going to do what's in Israel's interest. He's going to do what's in his interest, and supporting Israel is only in his interest as long as it's in his interest.
All right,
just on this point, there's recorded history that everyone can use to make their decisions about where Donald Trump stands on Israel.
Benjamin, you didn't comment on the Ukraine Zelensky thing, and I think we didn't do enough on that either. What are your thoughts on that, just closing, in terms of that? Is that a net positive for Trump? Is that a net negative for the Harris Walls? What do you think?
Some quick thoughts, because there was a lot of Republican criticism to Zelensky's visit to Pittsburgh. And part of that criticism was based on the fact that Zelensky criticized J.D. Vance and said that he's radical, or maybe too radical to be in office. And people took that as foreign interference in American elections. I have no great love lost for Ukraine. They have a really brutal history when it comes to anti-Semitism over the centuries. However, Russia wasn't very good on anti-Semitism either over the centuries. And certainly I have no great love lost for them in that regard. I think that Vance made a mistake. He basically takes a position that Ukraine should cede some territory to Russia. I don't think that Putin should be rewarded by one sliver of land for the aggression that he foisted upon Ukraine. But I think that Zelensky damaged his cause when he appeared to take sides. So this will still be played out, I think, over the next year or so once the new administration takes over.
We have to get in the lightning round. We got to go. I can hear the clouds going. We are on the eve of the vice presidential debate. Who do we think is going to win that debate? Walter, Vance. Remember, we have 5 minutes for 5 questions, so let's keep it quick. Benjamin, you go first, please. Who's going to win that debate?
I think Vance will win the debate, but the media will declare Walls the winner.
Interesting. Eli, what do you think?
Oh, there's no question. J.D. Vance is going to win the debate. He's going to talk with substance, and he's going to talk to what people care about. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Whether or not it's going to make a difference in the polls, probably not, because as we all know, nothing matters.
Stu?
Pre-existing conditions matters. Having a sick person in your family and not getting the rest of your family kicked off the health insurance, this is not a righteous thing. It's a political thing. J.D. Vance, this week, in response to the last debate, where Donald Trump had the conceptions of a plan, rolled out their plan to fundamentally put healthy people in one set of health insurance companies and sick people in another. For communities like ours, larger families, greater incidences of certain diseases, extremely troubling because we lose health insurance. But like I would argue, to answer your question, Ali, he's already lost the debate because it's going to be a continuation of the previous one. He's already lost it on healthcare. Healthcare is one of the most important issues.
My prediction is that John Adams said famously it's one of the most irrelevant positions that's ever been created. I don't believe in the slightest that it's going to affect elections at all. I think that since Lloyd Benson had his moment, that was the last time it was very relevant. I know that Harris had her moment of I'm speaking, and that was a big moment for her. But otherwise, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference here. I think it'll probably be pretty much net with the two of them. They're both intelligent individuals who know how to debate. I don't think it's going to be that different, and they're about the same age, give or take. So, I'm sorry, he's a little younger. He's a little younger.
Just
They're not,
a little.
They're both. We don't have a candidate in either one who's nearing 80. Let me reframe that. So I think that'll be important. RFK Jr. has removed himself from 4 battleground states. My opinion on this is it doesn't matter. I don't think anyone cares about RFK Jr. politically, but I was curious, just quickly, gentlemen, what do you think about that? Does it have an impact on the elections? Stu, what do you think?
There's a lot of factors. Abortion is going to be a factor. The fact that Trump is losing parts of Nebraska by 9 points is a factor, because that means he's also going to lose the similar parts of Missouri by 9 points. RFK, not really a factor.
Ellie, what do you think?
In a tight election, the small slivers where we know that margins are very small, there are small slivers that make a difference. There is a small sliver that's this RFK Tulsi voter that is kind of fanatical and would follow them off a cliff. So I think it does have the potential to really matter.
Benjamin?
I'm sticking with what I've said up till now, that whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the election. And I don't see RFK or Jill Stein or anyone else on the ballot influencing who's going to win Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania will either be won by Trump or by Harris, and it might not even be as close as it was last time.
One recent poll has Trump ahead only by 1 point in Florida. Is Florida a concern, gentlemen? Ellie, what do you think?
No.
A resident Republican.
No.
Stu, what do you think?
I mean, anyone can use their
Absolutely.
brains,
Absolutely. Every state where there's abortion matters. Every state where there are Haitians who he has slandered and slimed, and there's a lot of them in Florida. Maybe they haven't turned out before, but they will. Absolutely. Florida's
Benjamin?
The Republicans have a huge edge in registration statewide, and it's gotten bigger as the last couple of years have gone on. I think part of what might be dragging Trump down in the polls in Florida is the fact that Rick Scott is running for re-election, and he's certainly in a tight race against his Democratic opponent. But I see Trump winning by at least 7 points in Florida.
I agree with Benjamin. We don't talk about New York being red, and we don't talk about Florida being blue. Economy is seemingly recovering. Harris trailed Trump by only 3% among American adults polled by Marist on which candidate would be better at holding the economy. Does this help Harris? Seemingly so. I would say it does. I think that's big news. Only 40 days in. Let's talk to our Stu. What do you think?
Absolutely, yes. On to the next.
Ellie.
Every poll has biases. Look at Marist's lean. There's no question. Nobody who's paying grocery bills thinks that the economy in this country is actually doing better than it was 4 years ago. S&P, maybe. I mean, yes, but not the things that matter to the voters.
Benjamin, what do you think?
Having worked in the financial markets for many years, for 13 years in my career, in addition to over 30 years in journalism, I know that there's normally a big lag time between the time that the statistics start to improve and people themselves feel the improvement. So right now we see a lot of the stats getting better. Certainly interest rates have started to come down. Gas prices have definitely come down. But people are going to feel that, we haven't seen the improvement in our lives yet. So I think that when it comes to those who are going to vote on the economy, I would still give an edge to the Republican ticket over the Democratic ticket.
So last question, and really, gentlemen, just 10, 15 seconds. You got to give us your prediction. If you don't have one, that's fine. This will air and almost be October. Will we have an October surprise? Do we see an October surprise coming? Everyone talks about it. What do we see? We think you're gonna have some big October surprise. Ellie, what do you think?
I don't think at this point that there's anything left in the presidential
You're done
politics
being surprised. You're
that
done.
can surprise anybody. Yeah, there's gonna be nothing surprise. Think about the October surprises we've seen, right? None of that would surprise you today.
Nothing could beat it. Benjamin, what do you think?
Barring another assassination attempt, God forbid, I think that we've seen the worst of what can happen. And I think the last month of the campaign will be unusually uneventful.
Stu, shaking his head no.
We're going to be fighting in places that you would never imagine that we would be fighting against all Republican turf.
Bold prediction, which is perfect timing now for our fearless forecast. I'm going to start off and I'm going to make a fearless forecast going back to the top of the hour. I think the Zelensky thing is big. Americans hate it when they feel like foreign leaders are interfering in their elections. And I think it's a big deal that he went to Pennsylvania. He got widely criticized for it. I think it's going to be, I think if there's a poll done or something else that happening, I think it's going to pick up steam this week and beyond. I think it is a pivotal, it's something that Americans understand. And the idea that a Ukrainian leader, he's going to come to Pennsylvania and weigh in. And I saw he made a remark also about Vance also. I think it's bad. It's bad, and I think it's going to have an impact. Binyamin, what do you give us for your fearless forecast this week?
I think that China has a chance of starting up with Taiwan sooner than we expect. There's been talk in American defense circles that China is looking toward 2027 in order to attack Taiwan. I think it could happen faster, not in the next month, but this is something we really have to watch. The Far East could really get destabilized fast and change the whole picture in the world.
Another foreign policy prediction. Stu, what do you got for us? Anything domestic?
Yeah, so I couldn't say this under the October surprise question you asked because it's not going to be a surprise, but Donald Trump will melt down. He is not able to be in a close race. There's going to be a movie coming out about him, about his early life on October 11th that he is going to fight. He's going to fight a movie. People are going to think he is crazy, and he is going to continue to lose ground.
Bold prediction. Ellie, what do you got for your fearless forecast?
Trump, we know from the last two cycles, is, if not the best, among the best closers in presidential politics. He's in a better position right now in polling data, for whatever that means, than he's ever been at this point in the election. And I think that we'll see a lot of the swing state polls from high-quality pollsters coming out, moving closer to more into the Trump column or further into the Trump column over the next couple of weeks.
So Stu thinks he's going to implode, and Ellie's calling him Mr. October, now that we have baseball playoffs coming up. That was another edition of the Fourcast. We are thrilled that you listened. There's nowhere else you're going to get this level of news this quickly in about 20 minutes. If you agree with Binyamin or Ellie or Stu or myself, or you disagree with Ellie or Stu or Binyamin or myself, please let us know. We are interested, and in future episodes, we would love to share some of those agreements or disagreements and see whether or not you can do battle with any of our fearless forecast. And you can do that by going to podcasts, podcasts at mishpacha.com, podcasts at mishpacha.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you all.